If someone told me years ago that my own children would turn their backs on me, I would have laughed. I would have baked them an apple pie, poured them a cup of tea and told them, "You don't know my family," because I believed with all my heart that love and years together meant something in this world. My name is Margaret. I was born in 1941, grew up in a small rural town in Indiana, and lived most of my life in the same two-story White House that my late husband, Frank, built with his own hands. We raised two children, my son Robert and my daughter Helen. We worked hard, saved every penny, and dreamed of a simple, honest old age surrounded by family. Frank passed away 6 years ago. It was hard. The house seemed too big, the nights too long, but I found comfort in routines. I baked bread, tended my flower garden, and joined my friends at church every Sunday. My children visited, Robert with his deep laugh and big bear hugs, Helen with her careful, hurried affection. I thought we were close even if they were always busy. After Frank's passing, Robert started coming around more often, sometimes with his wife Julie, sometimes alone. He'd fix the fence, mow the lawn, take care of the bills I couldn't understand. Helen visited less often. She was always working late or tied up with the boys, but I made excuses for her. She had her own family after all. Still, every Thanksgiving, every Christmas we'd gather at my house. The grandkids would run wild through the halls, Robert and Helen would bicker over the mashed potatoes, and for a while I could pretend everything was the way it used to be. But everything changed the spring I turned 80. I slipped on the back steps and broke my hip. Suddenly, I wasn't the strong old lady anymore. I was a burden. After surgery, the doctors said I'd need help at home, at least for a few months. At first, Robert and Julie moved in to help. They cooked, cleaned, and made sure I took my medication. I was grateful, but I could see the strain it put on their marriage. Julie was never unkind, but she was always tired, always sighing when she thought I couldn't hear. Helen started calling more often, asking if Mom was still lucid, and if I'd thought about assisted living. She sent brochures in the mail, shiny photos of smiling retirees in bright, impersonal rooms. "It's for your own good, Mom," she'd say, voice flat and businesslike. The truth is, I didn't want to leave my home. Every corner, every worn step, every squeaky door was full of memories. Frank's old work boots still sat by the back door. The kitchen table was scratched from years of family dinners. Even the drafty attic, filled with boxes of forgotten Christmas ornaments and baby clothes, was precious to me. But my children started having private conversations, shutting the door when they thought I was asleep. I caught bits and pieces, words like assets, care facility, her will. Julie grew more distant. Robert snapped at her more. Helen became almost a stranger, talking to me like a nurse, not a daughter. One afternoon, while I was resting in my room, I heard them arguing downstairs. Julie's voice was sharp. "We can't keep this up, Robert. Your mother needs more help than we can give her. And you know she'll never agree to leave." I held my breath, listening. "Maybe it's time," Helen said quietly. "For her own safety. For ours too." That night, Helen came to my room, a tight smile on her face. "Mom, we need to talk. We can't do this anymore. We've found a place for you. A really nice assisted living home just a few miles away." My heart pounded. "Helen, this is my home. I don't want to leave." She squeezed my hand, but her eyes were cold. "It's already decided. You'll be happier there." I wanted to argue, to plead, but I saw in her face that it wouldn't matter. The decision was made. Over the next week, they packed my things. They spoke to me in gentle voices, but I felt invisible. I watched as they boxed up my life, choosing what to keep and what to throw away. Frank's boots disappeared. My photo albums were tossed into a plastic bin, to be sorted later. The day they drove me to the facility, it was raining. I watched my home grow smaller in the rearview mirror. The maple tree Frank planted, just a sapling, now a great waving giant. I pressed my hand to the window, wanting to scream, but the words stuck in my throat. The assisted living facility was nothing like home. The halls smelled of bleach and boiled vegetables. My room was small, with beige walls and a window that faced the parking lot. The staff were kind but busy. My children promised to visit every weekend, but as the months passed, the visits grew fewer. Helen called less. Robert and Julie sent cards for my birthday but never came together. I tried to make friends, but most of the residents were lost in their own memories. I missed my garden, my kitchen, the laughter of my grandchildren. One night as I sat by the window I realized I had been forgotten. My children had gotten what they wanted. The house, the money, their own lives unburdened by their old mother. But deep inside a spark of anger flared. This was not how my story would end. They had underestimated me. I might be old, I might be weak, but I still had my wits and a lifetime of love, patience, and yes, stubbornness. And so, as I watched the headlights sweep across the empty parking lot, I began to plan. I would not let my story end in silence. The first days in the assisted living facility blurred together in a mix of confusion, grief, and helplessness. I tried to keep a brave face, introducing myself to the staff and other residents, but the truth is my heart ached for home. Meals came on a strict schedule. Breakfast at 8, lunch at noon, dinner at 5. Everything was beige, walls, food, even the uniforms of the nurses. The other residents shuffled through the halls, some muttering to themselves, others sitting silently by the window, lost in their own worlds. No one talked about family. No one talked about hope. Every morning I sat in the common room waiting for someone, anyone, to visit. At first I kept looking at the door, hoping Robert or Helen would walk through with flowers or fresh-baked cookies, maybe even a grandchild in tow. But the door never opened for me. Helen called once, her voice clipped and hurried. "Mom, I hope you're settling in. They say you've got a lovely roommate." She paused. "We've started sorting through your things at the house. Let us know if you need anything." The call lasted less than 5 minutes. Robert didn't call at all. Sometimes Julie's name would appear on the caller ID, but it was always to ask about papers, keys, or bills. Never to ask about me. My roommate Edna was a small bird-like woman with sharp blue eyes and a memory that slipped in and out. She'd lived in the facility for nearly 2 years, and she'd long since stopped waiting for her own children. "You learn not to expect too much from family," she whispered one night, her voice as fragile as tissue. "They have their lives. We have this." The staff was polite but overworked. One young nurse, Maria, would sometimes sit on my bed at night, chatting softly as she took my blood pressure. "You remind me of my grandma," she'd say, tucking the blanket under my chin. She always said, "Family is supposed to be everything, but sometimes people forget." I tried to keep my mind busy, reading old books, writing in a journal, knitting scarves for charity. But the days stretched on, empty and gray. The highlight of my week was bingo night, when Edna and I would pretend to be fierce rivals, laughing quietly as we marked our cards. Then came the day that changed everything. I overheard 2 staff members talking outside my door. "Did you hear? That new lady's kids are selling her house. They've already listed it." A cold wave washed over me. My house, my memories, my life was up for sale and I hadn't even been told. That afternoon I called Robert, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. When he answered, his voice was tired. "Mom, it's for the best. You can't take care of the place anymore. We'll handle everything." Handle everything. The words echoed in my mind like a threat. That night I cried harder than I had in years. Not because I'd lost my home, but because I realized I'd lost my place in my own family's story. Days turned to weeks. I stopped asking about my house. I stopped calling my children. Instead I started listening, to the other residents, to Maria, to the stories that floated through the halls. Almost every woman here had a story like mine. Children who visited less and less, families that found them inconvenient, dreams that faded into wallpaper and fluorescent lights. But I also began to notice something else. Small kindnesses. Edna leaving a hard candy on my pillow. Maria sneaking in a flower from the garden. Even the cook, Mr. Jenkins, giving me an extra slice of pie because I reminded him of his own mother. These little gestures were lifelines. They reminded me that, even in the coldest places, warmth could survive. Then one rainy afternoon a letter arrived. It was from Helen, not a letter really, but a form. She wanted me to sign over power of attorney. "Just in case anything happens, Mom." The lines were cold, legal, final. I sat at the window, looking out at the gray sky, and made a decision. I would not sign. I would not let them erase me so easily. If my own children wouldn't fight for me, then I'd have to fight for myself. The days after Helen's letter were some of the hardest yet. I carried the unsigned power of attorney form in my pocket, folding and unfolding it so many times that the paper softened, then nearly tore. I kept wondering, how had it come to this? How could my own children be so eager to sign me away? I wanted to believe it was for my own good. But when I saw my old neighbor Mrs. Whitman, on her weekly visit to her own husband, she pulled me aside. I heard about your house, Margaret. I saw the for sale sign out front. I'm so sorry. Her words were gentle, but they burned. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling tiles, while Edna slept quietly on the other side of the room. I remembered the days when Helen was little, coming home with scraped knees and 1,000 questions. Robert building toy airplanes with his father on the living room rug. We were a family then, and I was at the center. Now I was a burden, someone to be handled, like a problem to be solved. I decided I would not go quietly. The next morning after breakfast, I shuffled down to the administrator's office. Mrs. Green, a round-faced woman with tired eyes, greeted me with a polite smile. I need some advice, I said. My daughter wants me to sign over power of attorney, but I'm not sure I should. Mrs. Green looked at the letter, her face growing serious. Mrs. Taylor, you have every right to refuse. No one can force you to sign this, not without your consent. If you feel pressured, we can connect you with a social worker. Her words gave me a small measure of strength. For the first time since Frank died, I felt like someone was truly on my side. I also began to speak more with Maria, the nurse. She told me quietly that I wasn't the first resident who'd been pressured by family. It happens more than you'd think, she said, her voice sad. People forget, but you're still you. You still have rights. That night, when Helen called, I finally found my voice. I got your letter, Helen. I won't sign. Not yet. Not until I understand everything. There was a long silence. Mom, you're making this harder than it has to be. We're just trying to protect you. Are you? I said quietly. Because it feels like you're trying to make things easier for yourselves. Helen hung up without another word. The following week I heard from Robert for the first time in months. He came to visit, standing awkwardly in my small room, fidgeting with the hem of his jacket. Mom, Helen's worried about you. She says you're refusing to cooperate. I looked at my son, my grown-up boy, taller now, but with the same uncertain eyes he'd had as a child. I'm still your mother, Robert. I can still make my own choices. He shifted uncomfortably. We just want what's best for you. I know you think that, I said gently, but what I need right now is for someone to listen. He didn't have an answer, but before he left, he squeezed my hand and said, I'll talk to Helen. For the first time in months, I saw a flash of the son I remembered, the one who used to help me plant tomatoes in the backyard, who brought me wildflowers just to see me smile. Life in the facility was still lonely, but it felt a little less empty. Maria brought me a small potted plant for my window, something to look after. Edna and I took to sharing stories after lights out, her childhood in Missouri, my first dance with Frank, the way life changes in the blink of an eye. One morning, Edna handed me a worn notebook. Write your story, Margaret, she said. If you don't, someone else will. And they'll get it wrong. So I did. I started writing page by page all the things I remembered, good and bad, happy and hard. I wrote about Frank, about the children, about the pain and the hope and the love that still lingered, even after everything. The world outside went on. My house was sold, my garden gone, my photo albums packed away somewhere I'd never see. But inside me a stubborn spark survived. They could take my house, my comfort, even my family, but they couldn't take my story. As the weeks wore on, something inside me changed. I no longer looked for Helen's name on the caller ID or waited for Robert to visit. I realized that for the first time in my life I had to rely on myself. Not as someone's mother or wife, but simply as Margaret. I spent more time with Edna and the other residents. I found that nearly everyone here had been handled by family members who once promised never to leave them behind. We became each other's comfort, a circle of quiet strength against the outside world. Maria, the nurse, became a true friend. She confided her own worries, her mother back in Mexico, struggling with her health and distant children. We would talk late into the night, sharing tea and quiet laughter. You're stronger than you think, Maria said. Most people would have given up by now, but I wasn't ready to give up. One afternoon I asked Mrs. Green, the administrator, if I could volunteer in the activities room. I was a Sunday school teacher for 30 years, I explained. I'd like to help with the craft group, maybe organize a book club. She smiled. We'd be lucky to have you, Margaret. Giving back even in small ways helped restore my sense of purpose. I read aloud to residents whose eyes had grown too weak. I organized a tea party for Edna's birthday, baking oatmeal cookies in the facility's kitchen. The staff noticed the change in me, so did the other residents. But Helen was persistent. Another letter arrived, more legal jargon, more gentle threats about my well-being. She asked if I wanted her to bring my personal items, but her tone was cold and businesslike. I wrote back myself this time. Helen, I appreciate your concern, but I am making my own decisions now. Please respect that. I would like my old photo album if you can find it. Weeks went by. No reply. One Sunday afternoon, as I finished reading to a group of residents, Mrs. Whitman, my old neighbor, came to visit. She brought news from the outside. I heard your house sold to a young family. They have children. Your garden is full of laughter again. Something inside me ached, but also I felt strangely at peace. The home I built was not just a building, but a place where love could begin again, even if not with me. Robert called unexpectedly one night. His voice was different, tired, uncertain. I talked to Helen, he said. She's upset you won't cooperate. But Mom, I want you to know I get it. I know you miss Dad and the house, and I'm sorry if we made you feel like you don't matter. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You're still my boy, Robert. I'll always love you. But I need you to understand, I'm still here. I have a life even if it looks different now. He was quiet for a long time. I'll visit soon, he promised. And for the first time in months I believed him. I settled into my new role, part mentor, part friend, part survivor. I was no longer afraid to speak up, to ask for what I needed. And slowly the loneliness faded, replaced by a quiet contentment. I had lost much, but I had also found myself again. But just when I thought the worst was over, a nurse brought me another envelope. This time the return address was a lawyer's office. Helen wasn't done yet. I sat on my narrow bed, the envelope heavy in my lap. The return address, Brighton and Lee, attorneys at law, felt cold and impersonal. With trembling hands, I opened the letter and began to read. It was a formal notice. Helen was petitioning for full guardianship over me. She claimed I was no longer capable of making sound decisions regarding my welfare or finances. She accused me, her own mother, of being manipulated by staff and other residents, and stated I was a danger to myself. My heart hammered in my chest. I could barely breathe. I thought nothing could hurt more than being sent away from my home. I was wrong. I took the letter to Mrs. Green, my hands shaking. She read it twice, then looked at me with sadness and anger. Margaret, you need a lawyer. Do you have anyone who can help? My children are all I have, I whispered. Not anymore, she said softly. But you have us. The next days were a blur of meetings, papers, and interviews. A social worker was called and I had to prove like a criminal that I knew my name, my age, the year. I answered every question, but inside I was breaking. Word spread around the facility. Residents and staff rallied to my side. Edna held my hand at night. Maria made sure I ate. Even the cook, Mr. Jenkins, checked on me every day. For the first time in months I felt less alone but also more devastated. Then Robert finally came, true to his promise. He sat with me in the common room, wringing his hands, unable to meet my eyes. I didn't know, Mom. I swear I didn't know Helen would do this. She told me you were confused, that you needed help. Do I look confused to you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head, eyes filled with shame. I should have come sooner. I should have believed you. The hearing came quickly. I was called before a judge, me, a woman who'd never even had a parking ticket, now standing trial for my own life. Helen appeared in a sharp suit, her expression smooth and unreadable. She told the court I was losing my mind, that I was being manipulated, that I wasn't safe. But something strange happened as she spoke. For the first time I saw not just my daughter, but a frightened, angry woman, one who'd spent so long managing everyone and everything that she'd forgotten what love looked like. The judge listened, asked questions, read the letters from staff, neighbors, even from Maria and Mrs. Green. Robert spoke up at the last minute. My mother is still herself, he said, voice trembling. We let her down. I let her down. Please let her choose. The judge ruled in my favor. The guardianship was denied. Legally I was free. But as Helen stormed out of the courtroom, I felt no victory. Only emptiness. Days passed. I heard nothing from Helen, no apologies, no calls. Robert visited more often, trying to make amends, but there was a wound between us that would not heal.